So earlier yesterday we did make this video here on the channel talking about how two injuries sustained to Blake Wheeler of the New York Rangers and Jake Guentzel of the Pittsburgh Penguins kind of changes everything for both of these teams that they're on, as well as other teams like Vancouver and Edmonton. But today's video is going to go over the Blake Wheeler situation in a little bit more detail, not necessarily because, there's extra stuff to talk about in regards to his injury or this or that or the other, but rather because I don't feel like I did as good enough at a job as I could have in talking about just how bad this really is for the New York Rangers and some of the other guys on the team. So let's go out there and redo a lot of what we did yesterday and just talk about Blake Wheeler, his entire situation, heading over to New York, and not have the entire Jake Guentzel conversation as a part 2 in the same video. So Blake Wheeler, as we had talked about yesterday, is an old guy, 37 years old, big power forward, right-handed guy, and he was the first-line right winger on this Rangers team. He was playing with Mika Zibanejad, he was playing with Chris Kreider. You could like it or not, the fact that he was in that position, but the bottom line is he was there, and he was fairly productive, scoring 21 points in 54 games played. That is a 32-point pace over a full 82. You could definitely say that he wasn't his best. He's had better seasons in the past, 90-point guy back-to-back with the Winnipeg Jets, and a 55-point guy last year with that same Jets team. But for Blake Wheeler, the fact that he took a contract that is so gosh darn cheap at $800,000 a year for one season just to play with New York, that in itself was already seen as a gift by many fans of the Rangers. Hey, this veteran guy really wants to play here, so he's going to sign a super cheap deal, and we ended up putting him on the first line. That's going to be difficult to replace no matter what the cap hit is. But for Blake Wheeler, part of what makes his injury that he sustained the other night so damning, not only is the fact that he is going to be out for the rest of the year. This 54 games played number, it will stay at 54 games. The word that we had talked about yesterday was there is some doubt as to whether or not Wheeler would be able to return for a postseason run with the Rangers. It would have to depend on how far they actually go without him. So the fact is, for Blake Wheeler, we may have just seen the last semblance of hockey that he has played in the 23-24 season, and the crazy part is, when you talk to some of the other Rangers about it, this is what Jacob Trouba went out there and said, yeah, we need a new right wing right now, but we lost a friend. We lost our teammate. I'm not saying this is true, but maybe he's played his last hockey game. It's emotional. It's something you think about. You don't take things for granted. And part of the reason it's so emotional to see Jacob Trouba go out there and say this is because when Blake Wheeler was the captain for the Winnipeg Jets this entire time, guess who else was a part of that team? That same Jacob Trouba, who is now the captain of the New York Rangers. You know, the interesting thing is, the overlap between Trouba and Wheeler in Winnipeg was so significant that by the time Trouba was sent over to the Rangers and by the time he was named captain, I remember having a few conversations asking the question, hey, is Jacob Trouba really the right guy to be a captain? Is he that leader that you need in the room? And I think a lot of the sentiment that we saw earlier on was, yeah, he's a guy who came up, he plays a gritty, shot-blocking style. He's not afraid to stand up for his teammates. He's not afraid to get emotional. He is a leader in the room, and he learned from one of the best during his Winnipeg Jets days, as Blake Wheeler was the captain of those teams, getting 90-point seasons, whilst Jacob Trouba was getting 50 points on a season. That is what allowed Trouba to get the $8 million contract that he's on right now. You could say he's maybe not worth that money based off of the production he has year by year, but he's been a very good leader, and a lot of Rangers fans respect the hell out of this guy because of it. In fact, he's I think the second most productive player in my fantasy league right now, just because of how many shot blocks and hits he gets. I have him on my team. I took him in the last round of the draft, which was very, very good for me. But to expand more so on the relationship here, to expand more so on the comments, let's go over onto an article published on lowhud.com. Now, you're going to have to bear with me. There are a whole bunch of ads on here. The ad blocker prevents the website from actually running, so I kind of have no choice but to turn it off. This article was published by Vincent Mercogliano from earlier yesterday, and it talks about a few Rangers' reactions to Blake Wheeler's season-ending injury after their outdoor practice at MetLife Stadium. Take a look at the comments made here by Trouba. It is the same thing. Maybe he played his last hockey game, and that's something you see as a player, as a friend. Here is what Peter Laviolette said about Blake Wheeler's departure and injury. He's been amazing ever since he's been here. He comes into work every day, positive, hardworking. You could see it right before even training camp started that he was in there early. He was committed to being a part of this team and making it successful. And he did that, both in the room and on the ice. When you lose a veteran player like that who has such an impact on the room, it's tough to replace. And of course, there's a difference between in the room and on the ice. Even on the ice, he was fine. Like, maybe not the best player you could expect out of a top-line right winger, but he still did okay, and he did have some chemistry going on with these guys. You could see there was a reason they placed him there, but the value off the ice and in the room is super underrated. And it's one of these things that even in Vancouver, we're seeing it with Phil Kessel. The reason the Canucks are going after Kessel isn't because he's going to be a 50-point guy. It's because of what he brings off the ice and his leadership, what that kind of a profile does to the younger players of the roster. And for Blake Wheeler, you could very well say that if you wanted somebody that Alexis Lafreniere and Capo Caco could look up to, this right here is probably the epitome of the guys to do that. So, big loss in the room, big loss for the rest of the season. This is what Jacob Trouba continued to say about it. It's emotional. It's something you think about. You don't take things for granted here. For me, it's a little extra tough. Blake Wheeler is a guy I looked up to and who has helped me a lot in my career. Now, the rest of the article talks about how Jimmy Vesey will be ready to step up and whether or not he'll be able to find some extra playing time in the lineup and the promotion there. But either way, for Blake Wheeler, this is more of an emotional situation than I initially anticipated it would be. Not just because of the first-line deployment, but because of everything else that he brings. And for Jacob Trouba in particular to be the guy at the forefront of talking about how emotionally distressing it is, it does kind of tug at your heartstrings a little bit, you know? Like, even if you're not a Rangers fan, even if you're not a Jets fan, even if you're just a sports fan, seeing things like this where this guy was under his captain, and now he's the captain of the new team, and the former captain came over, and now the former captain may as well have played his last hockey game, depending on when he returns for the Rangers in the postseason. Like, that's a story. That is an emotional story that I think you could write about in a book, or write about in a screenplay for a Disney movie. If everything had to have the happy ending, then okay, let's say the New York Rangers make the Stanley Cup Finals, they're up, I don't know, 3-1, and then they blow the lead, and it's tied 3-3, and then Game 7 overtime, and Blake Wheeler makes his return in Game 6. He plays a period in Game 6, and he doesn't really do all too well, and then he comes back in Game 7, and he's on the first line again, and then he scores the overtime winner, and then he retires. That would be the ultimate storybook ending, but of course, life is not fair, and people are mean, so sometimes you may not have the ending that you want. But either way, if you are a New York Rangers fan, and I know y'all's maybe out there watching this video since, I don't know, your team's not playing today, one of the only teams not playing, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the Blake Wheeler emotional side to the injury, and how Jacob Trouba, Captain Troobs, went out there and responded to everything? This is kind of a response to that video that we did make yesterday, but instead of expanding on Jake Guentzel too, I wanted to focus more so on Wheeler, because at this point I feel he deserves it. So thoughts in the comment section below about the Blake Wheeler and Jacob Trouba conversation regarding the Wheeler injury till the end of the season. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.